Hello, scholars, and welcome to this first lesson on drawing 3D using one-point linear perspective. I am Mr. Sanchez. I'm the visual arts educator at Virginia L. Hurd Elementary STEM Academy. These are the goals for the lesson today. We're going to provide definitions and examples of perspective, tell you what it is, and show you how to achieve a three-dimensional appearance in drawings and paintings. The second is to provide definition and examples of linear perspective. And the third is to demonstrate step-by-step how to create a three-dimensional urban street using this technique. These are the Georgia standards of excellence that we are using. You notice we have 5th through 8th grade. But if you are from another grade level, you can attempt this also. And if you're a parent, you may also do that. You will need simple materials. Just use whatever you have available. Drawing paper, of course, is preferable. But if you don't have drawing paper, you can use any type of paper. I'm actually using copy paper right now. You'll need a ruler. You'll need some sort of a straight edge in case you don't have a ruler, because you have to draw some straight lines. If you're like me, you really need some help drawing straight lines. And you'll need a sharpened pencil, probably 2, so that if a point breaks, you're ready to go. And you'll need a separate eraser would be preferable. If you don't have it, just use the eraser on your pencil. Have you ever wondered how comic book and graphic novel artists draw those really cool three-dimensional scenes? Well, in today's lessons, you're going to learn how to do that yourself using a drawing technique called perspective. Now let's figure out what perspective is first so we know what we're doing. The perspective is what gives the appearance of 3 dimensions. It gives that feeling to a flat drawing. In art, it's a system or a method to represent objects that get smaller and closer together the farther away they are from you. When you're drawing, you're actually drawing on a flat surface, and you're drawing a 2-dimensional drawing. It actually has height and length. That's dimension number 1. Dimension number 2 is how wide it is, or width. Perspective gives the illusion of a 3rd dimension. I mean illusion because it really isn't there. You're creating an illusion that makes people believe that it's 3 dimensions when they look at it. Now, I'd like you to observe this painting by François Millet, Jean-François Millet from the 1850. It's called The Sower. Why does the man look so big? Is he a giant? Pause for a moment and look at it and see if you could come up with a reason. Okay, like you might have guessed, no, he is not a giant. Actually, Millet is using 4 of the 5 aspects of perspective. The first one is size, the second one is placement, third is overlapping, and the fourth is atmospheric color. Now, it's important to understand that by using just one of these, you're not going to achieve 3-dimensionality. You have to actually use several of them together to actually do that. Let's look at them one at a time. Size. Things that are nearer to you seem to be farther away. Things that are nearer to you look larger, and the things that are farther away are smaller. So the man looks extremely large as opposed to the background where you see that things are really smaller. If that man were to walk to where those objects are, you'd see that they would tower over him. Try this yourself. Just take an object, put it in front of yourself, and then bring it right to your eyes, and then take it slowly away from yourself. And you'll notice that more of the background opens up as you take it away, and the object actually looks smaller. And when it's close to you, it looked very, very big. That's the same concept. Placement, when you draw something on your surface, where you place things matters. Because when you draw things towards the bottom of the surface, a paper or canvas, it appears in your brain to be closer to you. When you push it up higher on the surface, it appears to be farther away from you. You can notice that in the painting that things that are towards the bottom are larger and they're also closer to you. Overlapping, this is one of those duh moments, okay? So anything that's in front of you, whatever's in back is further away from you, whatever's in front is in front of you. That's very simple. But when you're drawing, you have to consider that. Remember that objects are hidden by the object that's in front. You cannot actually see the whole thing. So keep that in mind when you're drawing. An atmospheric color, fancy name, just means that in the distance, there's an optical illusion that makes you see colors faded and the tones change as they're further away from you. Closer they are to you, the more vivid and more accurate and more details you see in the colors. I want you to take a couple of moments and take a look at this image, and I want you to see if you can find these four aspects we just talked about. Okay, so size. You should have seen that the rock and the shrubs are closer to you. Notice how large they are as compared to the cliff that's behind it, okay? Secondly, placement. The shrubs, the ground, and the rock are towards the bottom of the photograph. As you go further out, you'll notice that the valley is further up on the surface, and the sky also is on the top portion of the surface. Overlapping, the shrub is on top of the rock is on top of the ridge, and so on, the ridge on top of the sky, and so on. So there, it gives you an order of things. This is first, this is second, and this is third. Atmospheric color. If you look at the colors in front of you, you can see all the details, you can see the colors that they actually are, but as you go further down the valley, you start losing detail and you start seeing more faded colors. The fifth aspect is called linear perspective, which is more commonly known as point perspective because of how it's actually constructed. Now, linear perspective was actually used by the Greeks centuries before the Renaissance artists actually rediscovered it. But what the Renaissance artists did that was different was that they actually figured out a method, a system of why perspective works the way it does. And what they figured out was that two parallel lines looked at a distance seemed to converge in a single point on the horizon line. The horizon line is actually, in the scene, is actually the imaginary line. It's not a real line. It's an imaginary line that separates the sky from whatever ground or water, body of water is in front of you. So it could be a lake or it can be an ocean. Inside a room, it's the midway point between the ceiling and the floor. Now, is the horizon line the same in all of these images? If you look at the bottom right image, it's right in the center. If you look at the bottom left, it's slightly higher than the middle of the surface. And if you look at the one way at the top on the right, you'll notice that it's higher and to the right. That single point that I was talking about is called the vanishing point. And the vanishing point is that point where two parallel lines seem to converge. Look at the railroad tracks. And I'm sure you've seen pictures of railroad tracks or gone by railroad tracks or seen them in movies. And you can see that it looks like if it keeps going, they're going to meet together. But obviously, trains can't run on railroad tracks if they come to a point. It's just an optical illusion because of the curvature of the Earth. Now notice that all the vanishing points are not exactly in the same spot. If you look at the bottom left, it's on the left, and if you look at the bottom right, it's on the right. Now that we know what perspective and one-point linear perspective are, we're going to draw a scene. I'm going to show you how to draw a street scene like the one you're looking at. It's not going to be exactly like that, but we're going to use the same principles. We will be creating the basic structures today, in this lesson, and in the following lesson, I'm going to show you how to enhance your drawing to make it look like this one. Let's begin. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is learn how to find the vanishing point and the horizon line. So this is the first method. You can do this freehand, but I'm not so good drawing lines, so I actually use a straight edge ruler to create these diagonal lines. You go from one corner to the other, forms an X, and where that X meets, that's where your vanishing point is. Then you can draw your horizon line from there, but I've added a method that actually makes that easier, and it's called a fold method. So what you do is you fold your paper in half, and you can actually create your horizon line that way. Another option that you have, a second method, and there's various methods to do this, is what I call the quadrant method. Basically, you're going to fold your paper into 4 quadrants. You open it up, and you find your vanishing point right in the middle there, and you already have the line here for your horizon line. We're going to go ahead and get started. I want you to follow right along with me, and I'm going to do it right with you. So we're going to use the quadrant method. Obviously, if you don't want your paper to have any folds in it, you can actually measure the distances, and I'm going to show you that. You can actually measure the distance of your paper this way with your ruler, and then find the midpoint, put a dot there. You can put a dot on the other end, and then simply draw a line across, and that way you don't have to fold your paper. This is, I have found, to be the fastest way to do it. Notice I have folded it horizontally first, and then I'm going to fold it, and I want you to be doing this right along with me, right there in the middle, okay? When I open it up, it's very important when you do this to do what's called a counterfold. You go backwards and open it up, do a counterfold there, and do a counterfold here, and your paper is going to be straight. All right? So now I have found my vanishing point right here. Now, when you do your vanishing point, remember this drawing is for you. I'm doing it very dark so you can see it on the camera, but you actually should just put a pinpoint, because this vanishing point is not going to be part of your drawing. It is going to be a guide. And some of the lines we're going to do today are going to be just guides. The horizon line is exactly that. It is a guide. So now I have this fold here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a dot at this end. I'm going to do it very dark there, and I think we need to reorient our focus here. There we go. All right, so I've got the dot right there, and I'm going to go to the other end and put a dot there. Now, I want to show you how I do the ruler. Notice I turn my paper because that's how I feel comfortable drawing. I want to see what I'm doing. So I'm actually turning my paper. When I hold my ruler, I actually open up my hand as far as it can go, and then put my pencil on the point where I'm going to start and the point where I'm going to end. And then I draw the line across, and there is my horizon line. Now, I'm going to give you a little tip. If you're like me, you've tried to draw a line and all of a sudden, whoops, the ruler slips on you. Here's a way to keep it from doing that. Take some masking tape, put it on the back, and that actually allows it to grip the paper and it doesn't move on you, okay? All right, so now that we have our horizon line, we're going to be drawing some guideline vectors. And these vectors, what they're going to do is tell us where we're actually going to start constructing our buildings. So the first thing I want to decide is that I want a sidewalk, correct? So I'm going to go from my vanishing point, and I'm going to start creating my sidewalk very lightly drawing with my pencil. What I do to draw lightly with my pencil is I don't hold it down here. I actually bring my fingers up a little higher, and I just go very loosely with my lines so that I can see it, but it's going to be very easy to erase. Okay? Then I'm going to draw a second line, and I want you to go ahead and do this with me as I'm drawing it. And don't worry about how far the line goes, because later you're going to be erasing part of it. This is actually going to become our sidewalk. Later, we're going to actually add a third line here, but we're not going to do that until we start our structures. Okay? So we want to start at the far end and work our way in towards the vanishing point. So I'm going to start at the far end of the building. This line actually now becomes the base of the buildings you're going to be drawing here. Okay? So put a dot right there. And then take your ruler. And what you want to do is you want to keep these lines as straight as you can. You can do this mathematically by measuring a point here and measuring another point, but we're kind of going to eyeball it today. So to do that, you check the left side of your ruler to make sure that's lined up with your paper, and that will keep your line parallel. Then simply draw a line straight up past your horizon line, just like that. Okay? I'll make this a little bit darker so it's a little bit easier for you to see. And it's okay if you make this line dark, because this is going to be one of the edges of the building. Okay? Next, and notice how I'm turning my paper again, because I want to see where I'm drawing. This is going to be a guideline, so this has to be very, very softly drawn. Do not draw a heavy line, because it's going to be very hard to erase. You will be erasing most of this line. So what I'm going to do is line up the edge of that line with the vanishing point, and very carefully just draw my line. Okay? If you did it correctly, you should have a triangle that's lying over on its side. Okay? Now, believe it or not, this is one of the edges of the building. So to make it look more like a building, we're going to draw horizontal lines. So this is going to be the bottom of the building. And I'm going to draw a horizontal line to the left. And this one can be a heavy line because it's the bottom of the building. And then I'm going to repeat what I did at the top. There you go. All right? So now it looks more like a pyramid, doesn't it? Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to end the building. You can decide, I want a thin building. So this is where you have to use your imagination. Do I want a thin building, or do I want a slightly wider building? So I'm going to put a dot where I want my building to end. I want this to be kind of a medium tall building, but kind of thin. So I'm going to put my dot there, and I'm going to check my ruler, make sure that I'm checking to make sure it's parallel, and draw my line. This also can be a strong line, because this is going to be the edge of your building. And voila, you can see it right there. It's starting to look like a box, right? And that's what rectangular buildings look like. And then at the bottom, I'm just going to make this line a little stronger, okay? So you can see through there. Now, what I like to do as I'm drawing is eliminate lines I don't need. Because imagine if we draw like 4 buildings here, all these lines are going to be starting to get in the way. So the first thing I eliminate is the guideline at the top, this very thin line. And this is the reason why I told you to draw it very lightly, okay? Because it takes a while. If you do it too heavily, it's going to leave a ghost image, okay? And so I also use a brush to kind of take off all that erasure, but you can also use a tissue. That'll work just as well. Okay, so now there's another line I'd like to erase, is the horizontal line. And that reminds me that this building is not invisible. It's actually solid. And so when that horizon line is gone, that reminds me that I'm going to have to do some shading there. So, and if you erase some of the line, that's not a problem. Just go back in there and redraw your line, okay? It's no big deal. All right, now we're going to very quickly build up this side of the street. So right now I want to do a shallower building, a shorter building, and I'm going to bring it right about there, okay? So go back to my vanishing point, line up my ruler. There's the point that I put on this line, and I'm going to take it right back to the vanishing. Okay, and that one's a little off, so I'm going to redo that line, okay, because I want to make sure I've got it right. Okay, I don't like how that line came out, so I'm going to go ahead and redo that line. Okay, and that's okay. Mistakes help you to learn to do things better, okay? There you go. All right, so now that doesn't look much like a building, but if I do this, if I put another dot over here, and then again, checking the left of my ruler to make sure it's parallel, I'm going to draw another line straight down. Okay, see that? Okay, so while I'm here, I'm going to make actually a taller building. Now, one thing I want you to really think about is remember that parallel, these two lines really, in real life, should be parallel. They really look like this, like these two right here. So the rule here is anything that's looking at you, like this rectangle, the vertical lines and the horizontal lines are going to stay exactly the same. They're going to be horizontal and vertical. Vertical lines do not get affected by that point. But any line that's on this side, on the left side of the vanishing point, or on the right side, as you'll see later, do get affected by the vanishing point. You'll notice that the top line goes down and the bottom line goes up. All right. So we're going to go ahead and put a little bit of a space between these buildings. Right now, this building is connected to this one. We're actually going to put a little space here. So put a dot right here. And that gives us a little space between this building and the next one. And this building, by the way, is not finished completely yet. We're going to finish that a little bit later, and you'll see why. And then I'm going to check my ruler again to make sure that it's parallel. And then I'm going to go further up and stop. Now, this is where it's going to look a little weird, okay? So go back to my vanishing point. I connect to that last line that I drew, and I draw a very light guideline, very light guideline. I'm doing it stronger than you should so you can see it on the camera. Everybody see that? Kind of looks like an isosceles triangle right there. Now, this is one of the reasons that I told you to erase guidelines, because it kind of starts getting in the way. So I'm going to erase this right here. I'm not going to erase the horizon line until I finish the building, okay? All right, so now I'm going to do the same thing I did here. I'm going to go to the left with a horizontal line. This is going to be the top of your building. And then I'm going to bring the left side of the building down as far as it can go. Now, once it touches something, I'm going to stop. And there it is. I stop right there because it's touching the top of this building. It really isn't, because there's some space between here and here. And you'll see later on when we put some shading how that goes. Now, at the bottom, you notice how at the bottom of this building it goes to the left like that. Here we didn't have to do that because they're connected, but here we do. It's not much, but it makes a difference when you put this horizontal line in here. It's a very short one. And we're going to do the same thing at the top of this building, okay? So we're going to go, and this time I orient on the horizon line to keep it parallel. And to the left, and there we go. Now, I haven't ended this, have I? So now I need a third line here to end my building. So I'm going to make the building end right there, make my ruler parallel, and bring the line down. Now I can get inside here, and I'm actually going to use my pencil eraser to get rid of the horizon line. And I'm actually going to add a little bit of shading here, just so that you can see the illusion that we've created here. And you can see there that we now have a three-dimensional. Okay, and I'm going to, there we go. We're refocusing. Everybody see that? So there's the three-dimensional aspect of this. Then I want you to add one more building, and it's going to be kind of halfway between these two. Okay, so we're going to put a dot right there. Again, go to the vanishing point. Remember, everything that is affected by the vanishing point are the parallel lines on the top and the parallel lines on the bottom. Why aren't we drawing the one on the bottom? Because this is the same baseline. Okay, we don't have to redraw it. So we're going to end this building right here. Draw a line straight down. And make sure it doesn't go all the way down to this line. Remember, this is going to be your sidewalk, okay? And then now that I have this, I can actually get rid of all these vector lines, or all the guidelines, called vectors. Sounds familiar from math, right? Okay, and now we can start working on our sidewalk, okay? Remember that I told you that the sidewalk is going to have a third line, but right now I want to extend this line a little bit more because sidewalks actually go like this, right? They actually curve. So I'm going to make that curve now by connecting, and you know what? I'm going to turn this upside down so I can see what I'm doing. There we go. I'm just going to go ahead and connect that. And let me show you what that looks like. Everybody see that? Now, you've never seen a sidewalk like that, but don't worry about that because we're going to change that. Now, between here and here, we're going to actually put another point and create part of the curb. So we're going to go to the vanishing point, draw a line. And now you can see that that's part of the curve there. And we just copy that, and I just feel more comfortable turning my paper over like that and creating the curve on this side right there. Okay, now that still doesn't look right, does it? So what we're going to do is we're going to add a little curve right here, okay? All right, and that is the basic structure of the street. This is where we're going to stop today. What I'm going to ask you to do is to actually create what we did on this side on the right side. Okay? So in this lesson, you've learned what perspective is and what linear perspective are. And we have started drawing a very basic 3D scene. We have not completed it in one-point linear perspective. In the next lesson, I'm going to show you how to complete your scene and how to enhance it so that it actually looks like a completed scene that I showed you prior. Feel free to practice on your own using another paper. I want you to leave this paper as it is so that you can create that second side of the street. Next time we're going to be adding more lines to the sidewalk to make it look like a sidewalk. We're going to be adding windows and enhancements to the buildings. I recommend that you leave that drawing that way so in the second session you can enhance your work. Until then, keep your imagination alive and stay creative.